Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're taking a look at the recently revealed Age of Wonders 4, a new 4X game from the folks at Triumph Studios that takes us back to the fantastical origins of the Age of Wonders series, with a game that's been in development for about 3 years already. It's slated for release on the 2nd of May this year, and with how much fun I had playing its sci-fi predecessor, I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on this one. They've already revealed quite a few features and gameplay elements with their initial stream, so today we're going to dive into everything we've learned so far. And if you're completely unfamiliar with the Age of Wonders series, don't worry, I'll talk about things in a way that makes prior knowledge irrelevant, and you can absolutely dive into the sequel without having played the prior games. If you'd like to keep up with coverage of this and other strategy games, don't hesitate to subscribe, and if you want to check out more games worth keeping an eye on this year, check out the video I've linked in the pinned comment down below. Now, with no more time to waste, and with timestamps below, let's begin. Storytelling in a 4X. The Age of Wonders setting is chock full of lore, with each game having tons to explore and, fortunately, without a need to play prior entries to get an understanding of what's going on. The Steam page of Age of Wonders 4 stresses that we can anticipate unexpected levels of storytelling for a 4X game, where decisions will actively shape the world around you, growing cities, warping the world, so on and so forth. The event generation system will react differently based on how you've been playing and what defines your faction. Good players and evil players will often see different opportunities and outcomes, for example, though it's not simply limited to such a black and white approach. One example of a small event chain we saw in the gameplay reveal had to do with a landmark on the campaign map which, upon being explored, opened up options regarding prisoners and those who were holding on to them. From the sound of it, some of the available options were determined by the players using a specific faction type with specific traits in place to enable specific actions. Some of the other options were determined by the proximity of a nearby independent city not belonging to any faction, and it would also influence the players' relations with them based on which decision they chose. In general, the events are determined by encounters, independent cities, heroes, and diplomacy alike. These kinds of events can really bring life and variation to the 4X gameplay loop, and with how much time was spent highlighting it during the gameplay reveal and on the Steam page and game's website, I expect this will be quite involved and expansive. Beyond a single run, though, and all the events that happen within that run, whether you play a narrative-driven scenario, a sandbox campaign, or in multiplayer, Age of Wonders 4 is introducing what it calls a Pantheon system, a way to keep a track of player characters and factions, and then perhaps bring them back in for future runs when you're playing as somebody else. This allows you to see how your faction might behave under the control of the AI, integrating choices you made into future campaigns. These choices are, as always, absolutely massive. Faction and leader customization remains a key part of Age of Wonders 4 as the RPG elements integrate with the 4X elements and as you go from campaign map empire building to turn-based tactical battles. While customization starts with determining what the world itself looks like and what kinds of traits and features it boasts, things get a lot more personal very quickly. Deep faction customization. Though you can play a run with one of the many pre-made factions and rulers, one of the main draws of the Age of Wonders series has always been the ability to customize your faction in a variety of ways. As far as your species is concerned, or as the game calls it, your form, your options include dwarf, elf, goblin, halfling, human, mole man, orcs, rat men, cat people, and toad men. Not only do these all come up with visual variations, but your decision here will actually apply starting traits to all of your units who take that form. Halflings, for example, have quick reflexes and are elusive, while moles have bulwark and underground adaptation. Orcs are strong and ferocious, Tigrin are resolute with desert adaptation, and goblins have fast recuperation and sneaky. That's not all of them, of course, but just the ones I was able to catch on the tooltips on display. If you don't particularly like how a form pairs with its traits, you can swap them out as you desire. The orcs are strong, dealing more melee damage, and ferocious, dealing more damage during retaliations and attacks of opportunity. Not a fan of that combination? Swap one, the other, or both out as you please. We can't see the UI at the bottom left corner, but it looks like there's a mind trait and a body trait as two separate categories, with almost all of the mind traits listed on screen right now. They seem to include everything from unit buffs to the option to adapt to and build cities in a variety of biomes. Physical traits, or whatever they end up being called, are unfortunately not displayed during the stream, so we'll have to look into them at some later date. It's important to note that if Age of Wonders 4 is anything like its predecessor, You'll at times be able to hire or recruit units that are of a different form than your own. These units will benefit from whatever their physical and mental traits are, as opposed to the ones that you're setting here for your own faction and its base units. Mixing and matching can allow for interesting synergies and experiments to develop over time, and that's part of the real fun in Age of Wonders. Nonetheless, this is just the first step of customizing your faction. Going beyond the physical, we have cultural traits. This determines your faction's origin, ultimately deciding what their starting city will be like, what buildings it'll have, and what units the first army will consist of as well. Beyond the starting elements, there are some long-lasting implications too. High culture, for example, will give structures the additional ability to improve a city's stability and knowledge generation, while barbarians have those boosts swapped for food and unit production, as well as additional damage for a unit's first attack in combat, while the industrious culture increases production income and changes how units defend themselves in battle. These cultures all have additional benefits beyond what I'm mentioning here, like unlocking certain technology for starters, or they might push your faction one way or another as far as alignment and affinity are concerned, as I'll explain in a bit, or they might give you access to rituals to help you on the campaign map. So, you can have mystic orcs, barbarian toads, feudal moles, whatever your heart desires, and then you can choose 2 trait points worth of society traits. Again, you can see many of them on screen right now, and they will all result in further choices being unlocked on and off the battlefield alike. It's worth noting that they're not all one-to-one. They don't all modify the exact same factors in different ways, but at times modify completely different factors, where one option might give you access to an additional unit, another might give buffs to a specific class of units instead. Looking at a few of these, we can see that Ancient Wise Ones make it cheaper to gain additional abilities as you unlock technology while unlocking additional starting tech as well. Ruthless Raiders provides food and unit production capabilities after battles, further adding a starting tech and some equipable items for your heroes to start with too. Devotees of Good get more mana and stability the more good-aligned you are, giving you access to additional starting units and more powerful support units, as well as an additional starting tech, while Prolific Swarmers makes it easier to grow populations while providing higher-ranked units across the board, so on and so forth. These are all subject to change over development, so I'm not going to go over every single tooltip we see here. Again, you can get a sense for how varied these traits are and how different combinations can offer synergies or interesting advantages, and above all, opportunities for replayability. Beyond the aforementioned alignment changes some of these traits and cultural options provide, you'll notice that they also modify the faction's affinity. This determines how your empire further develops and evolves, and it also impacts how diplomacy will play out with other factions. Seeing another faction's affinities will give you a good idea as to how they might approach problem-solving situations, so to speak, and the more aligned you and they are as far as affinities are concerned, the more likely you are to get along. Now, the decisions you make here are just to do with how you start, and over the course of a playthrough, you'll be able to modify traits and evolve your empire as a whole as a result, gaining access to additional options, being able to make friends with those who would otherwise be your sworn enemies, so on and so forth. The final step of faction customization has to do with tomes. Though you'll gather more as you go along, picking your starting tome will determine your starting unit abilities in battle, as well as the spellcasting options you'll have on and off the battlefield, and if I understand it correctly, how you'll progress through the tech tree as well. There are a total of 54 tomes across multiple tiers, and they include everything from teleportation and subjugation to pyromancy and necromancy, and the options you see on screen here. Do you use ice magic? Are you all about strength in numbers? Are you a fan of enchantment, etc., etc.? The sheer number of options here is tremendously exciting. I love this level of variety, and I love making fresh combinations just to see how they work well together or don't, and then try to overcome a fresh challenge. Each of these options will not just give you tools to use on the battlefield, but also ways to enhance your empire's capabilities on the campaign map, taking advantage of certain climates and biomes, speeding up your armies under certain conditions, etc., etc. As you can see, even at the start, there's a pretty wide variety of options, and each comes with a few different associated skills, spells, and abilities. Unit enhancements, summoning spells, attack spells, spells that have an impact on the campaign map rather than in battle, there's a lot. But, with all that said and done, it's time to customize your leader. Leader customization involves a few steps as well, and with Age of Wonders 4 pursuing RPG elements like its predecessors, The decisions you make here will serve only as a baseline that you'll build on top of as a playthrough goes on. You can choose between two origin stories. A champion is a local that has risen to power, and as a result, has better relations with independent cities near their starting position, and they also have economic and stability bonuses to keep the empire wealthy and the people happy. They also help non-hero characters gain experience more quickly, leveling them up faster, allowing them to become more capable more quickly. The Wizard King is less liked, seen as an outside oppressor, but they gain more mana from all cities, and they're able to use magic more effectively both on the world map and in combat, with the choice to over-channel, a specific ability that allows them to cast more spells in a battle than otherwise possible. Your form can be different from your faction's form if you're a Wizard King, since you're quite literally an outside oppressor, while champions have to be of the same form, but either way, you can go in and change your physique, your body type, your overall appearance, and the clothes you wear as well. You can also choose your starting weapon, though you're pretty quickly going to be able to swap weapons around and upgrade skills to get access to other equipment as well. As with prior Age of Wonders games, the roleplay element is a major part of things, gaining XP and improving your heroes to make them more capable in a variety of ways on and off the battlefield, and with 10 equipment slots including weapons and armor, you'll have a lot of toys to play with as you earn or find equipment and experiment with optimal combinations and your preferred playstyle, as well as how you actually see your leader as far as their capabilities are concerned. Are they the sniper? Are they the one who gets up close and personal? Do they cast from a distance? Are they the support type? So many options are available, you can really play how you please. These equipment slots will add additional skills and abilities to use on the battlefield based on what you've got equipped, and when you gain enough XP, you'll be able to purchase additional abilities as you level up, just like a traditional RPG. But with customization taken care of, let's take a look at how it all plays out, starting with a world map. Gameplay is divided into turn-based empire building on one hand and turn-based tactical combat on the other. Any new game will start with a randomly generated map as determined by various modifiers you can set, though preset scenarios are also available for narrative-driven single-player action. Each game has you start with a single city and an army led by your leader that you created or chose before the start of the game, and you have a variety of objectives you can pursue in an attempt to win the game. We don't yet know what all these potential victory conditions are, but if it's anything like the game's predecessor, your options will sometimes be tech-related, sometimes diplomatic, sometimes militaristic, so on and so forth, allowing for some decent variety. Your starting city has a limited zone of control, and these zones are determined by provinces, each with their own biome-related traits, each containing nodes that produce resources for the cities that control them, from food to gold to knowledge and more. Some provinces will be home to landmark locations that contain loot and potential event chains for those that are first to investigate them, and these event chains can sometimes influence how your relations with other factions develop, as described previously, or they might otherwise impact the progression of your own faction itself. Typically, having control over one of these landmarks will give you benefits at the city that controls it, and though sometimes these nodes are free for the taking, you'll typically need to fight against independent armies guarding the node to actually have access to its benefits, even if you're controlling the province itself. An established city's area of influence grows out from the center. As the population crosses certain thresholds, they're able to claim adjacent provinces where you've built outposts, and it seems as though the provinces are a lot smaller in size than in Age of Wonders Planetfall, which I quite like. It allows you to grow your cities in smaller steps, increasing the decision-making process involved as you pick and choose which nodes and landmarks to pursue for any given city. While the option to have one expansive city does exist, typically that comes with potential trouble as well, causing issues with stability, potentially triggering rebellions, or otherwise dropping productivity, asking you then to pursue multiple individual cities in order to expand in a more stable, sustainable manner, though again, it's not compulsory to take that approach, you can do as you please. Individual cities will be able to build units and buildings at the same time with two separate queues, and though they'll both cost gold, they otherwise tap into separate resources, where buildings need production and unit recruitment needs draft. This means that you can really develop cities to be unit production or manufacturing hubs separately depending on their strategic location. Beyond traditional empire building aspects, building structures, harnessing resources, recruiting units, and moving armies, you'll come across independent cities with which you can develop a relationship over time. Your affinity will determine how likely they are to converse with you, let alone side with you, and if you want to engage in diplomacy with them, you'll have to give them a Whispering Stone, an investment on your end that improves relations over time, though if you change your mind, you can always take the stone back and pause the improvement of relations temporarily. As relations improve, the rate of which is accelerated based on their opinion of you, you'll unlock higher levels of cooperation automatically, ultimately leading to vassalage. This progression only applies to free cities. Diplomacy with other full-fledged empires is a lot more involved, as we briefly see during the gameplay reveal. Apart from these two variants of non-player factions, you'll also come across brigand camps. These guys will always be opposed to you, and their camps will project an area of influence around them as well, just like a regular faction. At times, their area of influence might overlap with your own, causing friction and escalation, at least from the sound of things. Whether against a minor faction or a major one, when push eventually comes to shove, you'll be seeing a lot of the battle map. When you engage in combat, you can either auto-resolve the fight or participate in the battle manually. Manual combat takes place on a hex-based grid, with the environment determined by where on the campaign map you're fighting. It's your typical turn-based tactical combat with action points to spend between movement and ability use or attacks, and you'll have to keep an eye out for things like flanking, the high ground, choke points, etc., while also worrying about how units retaliate, making battle about more than just choosing who to hit and with what because of your own abilities, also asking you to consider how the enemy will react not just on their turn, but during your turn as well. Units all have specific roles that determine what their best use might be. A skirmisher unit, for example, is able to fight from range and in melee. Shield units might project an aura to provide additional defense to nearby units. Support units can provide similar defensive assistance. Naturally, individual units will have different specifics to their abilities. It's not like they all work the same way across the huge variety of tome, form, culture, and society options that you could have picked. That variety is the spice of life in Age of Wonders, and since you can evolve your faction and bring in troops of other inclinations, finding synergies becomes half the fun, if not most of it actually. The faction that you built will have its strengths and weaknesses determined by the decisions that you made previously. Cannibal units, for example, can consume enemy units to regain HP and keep fighting for longer, an ability not available to any non-cannibal unit. If you choose to have frost magic by picking the appropriate tome, you might have access to spells that freeze enemy units in place or otherwise cause frost damage. If you leaned into demonic or angelic angles, your units might end up with wings that allow them to fly and have increased mobility on the battlefield as a result. There is so much variety to explore, and I cannot wait to see all of it in action. Units themselves have a variety of stats as well, including attack, defense, armor, and morale. While the rest are fairly self-explanatory, the morale system has been fleshed out in Age of Wonders 4. Lower morale will result in a higher likelihood of fumbling, in other words, missing hits completely, while higher morale will result in a higher likelihood of landing critical hits and doing more damage than the usual. Morale is impacted by a variety of factors, such as having allies get killed or as a result of ability use, and when morale gets low enough, a unit might actually flee from the battlefield rather than drag things on in an attempt to whittle each other down when all hope is already lost. On the topic of fumbles and crits, it's worth noting that ranged units might miss their intended target from time to time, but they will hit somebody else in the path of their attack instead if that happens. And meanwhile, melee units always hit, but their damage has a range based on how well their hit landed. RNG in such a sense is somewhat minimized, as you are guaranteed your hits, though there is of course the variance in terms of how much damage you actually cause. You can't rest on your laurels of superior tactical capabilities, but they do go a longer way than in a game where RNG is king. It's also worth noting that individuals within a unit are important, as they all contribute to a unit's damage output. Losing a model or two in a unit that consists of 4 or 5 to begin with means you're going to see a huge reduction of efficiency the more damage a single unit takes, and so keeping an eye on defensive capabilities and healing accordingly becomes a super important factor to consider as well, and the same goes for the other side of the battlefield as well. If you whittle down enemy units, they'll be causing less damage on their turn, so you can kind of balance how you want to approach which targets to hit. The singular giant that stands on its own and will take multiple turns of full damage to take down, or a bunch of the little guys who can at least slowly be reduced in efficiency as you separately try to fend off the giant. It's all good stuff. I've always loved the Age of Wonders approach to battle, and I love how it integrates with a campaign map and the overall level of customization as well. Your leader, personalized as they are, will be showing up on the battlefield. They'll lead their own army, they'll use their equipment and their capabilities, and hopefully they'll bring you victory after victory. But if it's anything like its predecessor, you'll acquire additional heroes to lead additional armies, equipping them, using their abilities, and seeing them grow and develop over time at the same time as your empire expands across the known world, trying to claim whatever victory conditions it can. Age of Wonders Planetfall was an absolute joy, and I'm really looking forward to this return to the fantastical world with Age of Wonders 4. If you're excited to follow along, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel for Age of Wonders 4 as well as other strategy gaming content. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to leave a like and a comment down below. If you have any questions, ask away down below and I'll answer all that I can. But otherwise, as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.